The 2024 Formula One Mexico Grand Prix just finished up, and Carlos Sainz brings it home. He's your race winner, as predicted. We're here to go over all of the big moments of the race, starting with the very first lap. Let's get started with the jump of the race right off the line. Max gets a great start and takes the inside into turn one on Carlos Sainz. Lando is behind Max on the inside line, and Max got ahead of Sainz before turn one, pushed him off wide, but stayed within track limits into turn one. Sainz goes off through the runoff and keeps the position in first, but gives it right back as Max was past him, and he had to essentially overtake through the runoff. As this was all going on, there's a big crash in the midfield where Yuki tried to pass Alex Albon on the outside into turn one. Gasly was on the inside of Albon. It was like 3 or 4 wide at this point, going down the main straight into turn one. Gasly was in the middle, about 3 or 4 wide, makes a slight move to the outside. Albon reacts, goes outside, hits Yuki, sends him going straight forward into the wall. Albon had to retire shortly after as well. I don't think Gasly had any damage, so he kind of started the whole thing, and he got out scot-free, so lucky for him, I guess. But he just kind of wheel bumped with Albon. Albon adjusted, hit into Tsunoda. Tsunoda was trying to make he moved up a couple of places, was trying to make a really tough move onto the outside. He was kind of close, but yeah, it wasn't enough, obviously, to get by, and then he got hit. So he was out on the first lap. Albon was out on the first lap, so we had a safety car for about 6 laps. Also, during this time, we saw that Perez got a false start penalty because he parked outside of his grid box like an absolute moron. So he didn't get a jump start. His actual start, which was really great, and he got up like 5 positions off the bat, but he ended up getting a 5-second penalty, which he had to serve at his pit stop due to parking outside the grid box like a spaz. Safety car finally came in to start lap 7. Max was obviously ahead for the restart. Got a decent start, but he had to restart in that stadium section, which is super slow. So kind of not a great place to have to restart. Ended up with getting about a 0.6 gap to begin the restart lap, and got the gap up to over a second by the end of the lap. Sainz got back into DRS range quickly in lap 8, and lap 9, Carlos Sainz takes Max into turn 1, gets by him on the first try, which is something I'd love for him to teach Lando Norris, who we'll get to in a second here. Max complained on the radio after this about having empty battery for the restart and having the wrong mode on, which is obviously pretty rough. That was a great time to recharge the battery, and if he came out of the restart with no battery and everybody else with full battery ready for deployment, that's going to be a big issue. So lap 10, Max falls into Lando's attack range. Lando attacks. They make contact as Lando late breaks to the inside. Max attacks him a few corners later after he gets past, and Leclerc comes through ahead of them both. Max attacked Lando super hard on the inside. They both go off, and we'll get to the repercussions for that later, but essentially, Lando took Max into, I believe it was turn 4, got past him, had to go off a little bit, and then turn 12, Max came back on the inside, took him really wide, and ended up getting penalties for both. Ended up getting a 10-second penalty initially for just turn 4. They continued to investigate the turn 12 incident. He ended up getting 2 10-second penalties, so 20 seconds total they had to serve at his pit stop. Lap 15, so lap 13 was when lap 13 also Checo was moving up the field up to 11th by this point. He still had his 5-second penalty, but he was moving up from the back of the grid. Lap 15, Max got Lando gap to 1.4 while he was 2.4 seconds behind Leclerc in P3. So after these overtakes, Max did stay ahead of Lando, kept the position, and ended up getting penalized. Not necessarily for keeping the he did get penalized. The second penalty was for pushing off and getting an advantage, going off the track, gaining an advantage. So yeah, 2 penalties for Verstappen. Ended up keeping the position, so Lando was behind for a little bit and ended up losing a bit of race time for that, and could have affected him catching Carlos Sainz toward the end, which again we'll get to. But lap 15, after the overtakes, Max still ahead of Lando at this point, awaiting the penalties essentially. Gets the gap up a little bit, and the gap to Leclerc in front of him is starting to gain. He's starting to lose to Leclerc in front, and Lando's starting to catch him as well. So not a good spot for Max. Same time around lap 15, Alonso had to retire. Really shit for his 400th Grand Prix. I think it was some kind of mechanical issue. We didn't hear for sure. I don't know why they couldn't just switch him out for Lance in the fucking pit stop or something. But anyway, Alonso had to retire, so he was the 3rd retirement of the race. Lap 20, Max got another 10-second penalty. That second penalty came in, adding to the gap. He didn't have much of a reaction during the race. Obviously, wasn't happy about it, but You can't. It was. I knew watching live that they were at least going to penalize him for the second move. I thought the turn 4 move was kind of just racing, but the turn 12 incident where he pushed Lando wide, I knew he was going to get at least a 5 or 10 second penalty for. Lap 27, Max boxed and served his penalty as Lando continued out. He went in really early and was struggling with the hards. They've had struggles on the hards in a lot of the races recently, did Red Bull. So that continued here. They're much better on the mediums than they were the hards. Max came out in 15th with only Perez and Stroll behind him, as well as the 3 DNFs. Lando came into pit lap 31, and he was the first of the top 4 to pit. Lap 31 as well, Max takes fastest lap and is 10th after the others pitted. So he was already moving up at this point. Lap 33, Carlos pits, and it came out 9 seconds ahead of Leclerc, so pretty good gap for him, which wouldn't last. Lots of overtakes happen around this pit stop window here as Russell quickly got Piastri and Lawson. So Russell pitted, came back out, got past. Piastri was obviously struggling a little bit. He made up quite a bit of ground as well, but the Mercedes was not as good as the McLaren, I don't think, and they were making pretty quick work of Piastri when they had to get past him, and the Mercedes were just fighting with themselves the whole time anyway. So Piastri came on the radio lap 34 and was just kind of pissed off because he was getting passed through the midfield and hadn't pitted at this point. That's why he got passed. I'm sorry, should have prefaced with that. But Piastri was still on his 34 lap old mediums at this point, which everybody else for the most part had pitted. Piastri, Lawson, and Hamilton around this time, lap 35, had a bit of a clusterfuck. Piastri passed Lawson, and then a turn later, Hamilton passed Lawson. So he might not have pitted by this point either. I'm not 100% sure, but it was a lot of passing around this pit stop window. Lap 36, Max gets Colapinto and is into P8 and under 2 seconds behind Lawson, which obviously wouldn't be a tough overtake once she got up there. Lap 38, Max passes Lawson and is 3 seconds behind Piastri in P6, who has not pitted yet, so he's pretty much a net P6 at this point at lap 38. Lap 43, both Ferraris firmly in 1-2. Norris was 5 seconds back, and Russell was another 17 seconds back, with Hamilton right behind Russell as well. They were pretty much battling for the entire end of the bottom stint of the race, the end stint, and the Ferraris were pretty firmly up top. Lap 46, Lando sets fastest lap, and at this point he would set a couple fastest laps in a row and really close the gap to Leclerc. Lap 50, Sainz was complaining that Leclerc needs to slow down, and he had to up his pace a bit since Lando was closing on Leclerc, so Leclerc was trying to back off as much as he could and give Sainz enough of a gap. He wasn't trying to push him at all, but obviously Lando was closing in very quickly on Charles, so he had to put a little bit more pace on, and Carlos was like, yo, can we chill the fuck out? I'm just trying to bring this home, bro. Anyway, around this time again, lap 50, lap 51, Mercedes were very close and battling while Max was behind both of them and still losing time, not catching up even though they had to battle the entire time. So that was pretty indicative on the Red Bull pace, especially on the hards. I think on the mediums he was doing a lot better pace than them, and we'll have to see in the stats afterwards, but they were not good on the hards once again. Lap 52, Colapinto took fastest lap after he took hards to lap 48. So he pitted lap 48 for mediums. He did a reverse strategy and took fastest lap. He wouldn't stand, but he did set a good lap. Lap 57, Piastri finally breaks the wall of Haas in the top 10 and passes Hulk for P8, while Magnussen was still another 8 seconds ahead up in P7. They had another great weekend as well. Also on lap 57, Lando got the gap down to 2.4 with Sainz only 6.5 ahead of Leclerc. So under 10 seconds now is Lando to to Sainz with only about 14, 13 laps left. Lap 58, there were some issues where the front of the pack was catching up to benchmarkers, and it essentially allowed Lando to get a lot shorter gap to Leclerc and pass him in the end. 10 laps to go, Lando gets into Leclerc's DRS as he takes fastest lap once again. Leclerc gets a little bit of oversteer coming into the last turn of the track, coming into the main straight, and almost dumps it. I don't know how he saved it in the dirty part of the track, but it was very close. He just gave it a little bit too much gas and spun out coming out of that last corner onto the main straight, and that allowed Lando Norris to get past. Lap 66, couple laps left here. Hamilton finally gets past Russell after about 15 laps of battling him. That was pretty much all that happened for the bottom end of the race, other than Lando Norris closing in on Charles Leclerc, which kind of seemed inevitable because Lando was constantly putting fastest lap after fastest lap and taking tenths off Leclerc's time every lap. Colapinto went to overtake Lawson towards the end of the race, and his tire ripped up Lawson's front wing as he forced Lawson into pit. Yeah, just made a really aggressive overtake. Ended up getting ahead, and Lawson kind of gave him the space, and then Lawson tries to cut back in to get behind him. It was just too close and just destroyed his front wing on Colapinto's rear wheel. At that point, they took him into the. He wasn't in a point scoring position. He wouldn't have gotten in the points, so they put him into the pits to try to get a fastest lap attempt. And a lot of teams went for this fastest lap attempt at the end. Leclerc went for it because he had about a 28-second gap to Russell behind. He ended up getting the fastest lap, and Carlos Sainz comes through as predicted. That's 5 weeks in a row we got the correct race winner. Just saying, just saying. Sometimes it works out. Here's your final order here. We have Carlos Sainz taking pole position, taking the race win, had the lead, I think, the entire way. Maybe in a pit stop he had to change, but I believe he had the lead the entire race. Really great weekend for him. Lando Norris comes through in second after Charles Leclerc had that moment in the last turn of the track. Leclerc comes through in third. A good weekend for him, but again, the reason I picked Sainz over Leclerc was because Sainz just had trends a little bit better at Mexico in the recent races than Leclerc did, and that was evident again this weekend where Sainz was just the better Ferrari of the weekend. So fourth place, Lewis Hamilton, followed by George Russell. They were duking it out the whole race, and Hamilton ends up ahead. Max Verstappen comes through in sixth place, 10 points behind Lando Norris. Fortunately, I guess for Max, Lando didn't get the fastest lap. Leclerc took that, so if Lando couldn't have gotten past, he might have just gotten the fastest lap. It would have been 9 points anyway. But regardless, a 10-point swing this weekend for Lando. That's the minimum of what he's going to need moving forward every weekend to have a chance. But it'll keep it interesting, man. At least he did his fucking part this weekend and didn't come behind him. So seventh place, Kevin Magnussen, and the Haas get points again somehow, dude. They've been having just phenomenal races since the break. Oscar Piastri comes up from 17th, 18th place, and finishes in the points, 8th place. Nico Hulkenberg, the other Haas, in 9th. So both the Haas points scored. Both the Red Bulls can't do that. You know what I mean? But we got the Haas in there anyway. Pierre Gasly, the last point scorer, in 10th place, followed by Lance Stroll in 11th, Franco Colapinto in 12th, Esteban Ocon in 13th, Valtteri Bottas in 14th, Guan Yu Zhou 15th, Liam Lawson 16th, and Sergio Perez at his home race, the final classified driver, behind Liam Lawson, mind you. So if that's not enough for this motherfucker to retire, I don't know what is, dude. I'm done with this shit, dog. Max ain't got no goddamn help, bro. Everybody else, we got both the Ferraris up here. We got the McLarens. Oscar had a bad qualifying. Both the Mercedes right here. The fucking Haas, bro. They're chilling. They're doing their part. Each of them, they're doing the best they can, bro. They're both in the points, and we got fucking Perez down in 17th, only ahead of 3 people that DNF'd. Just disgraceful. Just absolutely disgraceful at his home race. If you can't find any kind of pace at your home race out of all the races of the year, bro, it is time to hang it up. I'm sure we're all done with seeing this shit, bro. There's plenty of younger drivers or other experienced drivers that would be on the and that's what it comes down to is Formula One's supposed to be the best of the best, and when you have people like fucking Stroll and fucking Guan Yu Zhou and Perez and even Ocon at this point too, I don't think he deserves to be on the grid. I don't know how the fuck he got to drive for next year. He better bring in a ton of sponsorship money because he's dog shit too. Okay, there's plenty of other guys that would love to have a chance, and somehow these guys keep getting spots, and I don't understand it. Really good race overall, honestly. A lot of overtakes, a lot of action the whole time. We had another battle between Max and Lando. It kind of went as you would expect. I mean, at least as I would expect. We knew Max was just going to defend his ass off against Lando, and I think he just went too far this week. And I think after this week, he's going to have to take a second and realize that it's more worth it to just let him through or not make it or just do the absolute most you can within the limits. What he did today, at least around turn 12, that was not with any intention of staying within the limits. He was just sending it for the fuck of it, dude. And that's not gonna keep him in this championship. And he's already fighting with against a stacked deck of cards. He's already got the third or fourth best car at this point, and doing shit like that and losing 20 seconds to your race is not going to help. I mean, he would have finished ahead of both Mercedes and only been 6 points behind. He probably wouldn't have finished ahead of Leclerc, but would have been 6 points instead of 10 points that weekend. That's going to make a big difference in the end. And I think he'll be able to take a second and have some retrospect and realize that not defending so hard and just letting him letting him through at that point would have benefited, because it's not even like he held him up enough where Leclerc could finish ahead in second. That would have been nice. That's kind of what it seemed like he was trying to do, just keep him back long enough for the Ferraris to get enough ahead, but that's not what ended up happening. And in turn, he lost 20 seconds and gets behind both Mercedes and loses 10 points this weekend. So not great, especially starting from second on the grid. I mean, we knew going into this, at least I imagined, that he was not going to have the pace to fend off Lando for the entire duration of the race, but he had enough to stay ahead, at least in third or fourth place at the very least, and stay close enough, maybe 1 or 2 places behind Lando, not 4, and now 10 points back. So good weekend for Lando in terms of making up making up pace, or making up space on that gap to the World Drivers' Championship. Leclerc had a chance to put a little bit of space in the championship on Norris as well. He didn't get to move up. And Sainz, who's the least likely to win, still, I guess, mathematically possible, but he's not going to win. He ends up taking the race win here. A good race for Leclerc, but just that one issue at the end. He would have gotten past either way. I mean, Norris was closing in pretty quickly each lap. Good weekend for the Mercedes. Again, I know Lewis was complaining quite a bit about the car between practice and qualifying. I guess it ended up working out, bro. You obviously weren't that slow. A lot of the times he's fucking bitching about it. They end up being really quick anyway. So he had enough pace to pass George Russell. So really good weekend for the Haas. Oscar had a pretty good recovery drive, ends up in the points. He did the best that he could to get back and get some points for the Constructors' Championship. Gasly drags the boat of the Alpine into 10th. Yeah, not a great weekend for the younger drivers. Obviously, Colapinto outside the points, Lawson, Sonoda. I did predict a Sonoda DNF too, although that wasn't the only one. I did have a feeling that was going to happen at some point, and he also crashed out in like P3, or was it qualifying or P3? One of those two sessions. So, not a good weekend for him either. Ended up qualifying ahead of. Oh, it was qualifying. He ended up qualifying ahead of Lawson and then binning it and causing the red flag to end the session. So. Yeah, pretty good weekend though. Pretty exciting. It's going to be interesting going into next week in Brazil to see who's got the best pace again. It seems like Ferrari has had the best car in the race. Maybe not necessarily in qualifying, but over the course of the race on the tires, and the race pace has been really good recently. Seems like at every course they're really good. So it's going to be interesting to see next week. I don't know. I don't even know what to predict at this point, even any preliminary predictions. I don't know. We'll come out probably tomorrow or Tuesday with the prediction video. I'm riding on like a five race win streak here on the race winner, so we're going to try to keep it going. I think the only reason I'm getting them right is because I'm not betting on any of them. I swear to God, if I bet on one of them, it's going to be the most wrong thing ever. So we're not going to do that. The only other thing to note before we go is Max Verstappen did say he's probably going to have to take a grid drop at some point for the remainder of this year. I imagine that's probably either going to be next weekend in Brazil or in Las Vegas. Probably the two best overtaking opportunities for him, other than Abu Dhabi and what was that other one? The other one, Saudi Arabia, I forget. We'll see. The other Middle East one, I don't know. They're all the fucking same, right? Anyway, we'll be back early this week with predictions for next race in Brazil. Let me know what you thought. Carlos Sainz, bro, what can you say, man? Just had a feeling he's going to be the better Ferrari this weekend. Ferrari's been the best car in the race, so we'll see next weekend, and that'll do it. Peace.